Hey YouTube, this is Austin from Austin's Nerdy Things. Today we will be talking about how to deploy virtual machines in Proxmox with Terraform. This is a follow-on from the last video where we created a Ubuntu cloud-init image, and we will be using that template we created yesterday in order to deploy it using Terraform. So we will basically be following along on the blog post that I wrote for this, which I will link in the video. It's on austinsnerdythings.com, and the code is in here, easily copy pasted. So let's go ahead and get started. First of all, we need to install Terraform on the machine that we will be using to run all these commands. For me, that is on my personal machine. I do use Windows Subsystem for Linux, so I fire up PowerShell or CMD and then type in WSL, and so here I am in a Linux system on my Windows computer. And so the way this goes for Terraform, really there's two patterns for how you install things in Linux. Number one is you just hit apt update and then apt install package name for some of the more common packages, but the other way is essentially you go out and grab a signed key for the package you want to install. This is if companies are hosting their own thing, and for Terraform, this is how you do it. Docker is another example of a software that uses the same pattern. So first of all, you have to grab the key and then pipe it into apt key add, and so I've already done all this, so it's probably just going to say OK, and basically just breeze through. So we're going to add that, and then we are going to add the new repository containing the Terraform software, which automatically does an apt update as well. And so this should be relatively up to date, and then we will say sudo apt install Terraform, and it's going to upgrade apparently. Okay. So we went from 1.0.5 to 1.0.6. There are ways to hold this. Most of the tutorials I read do actually recommend holding it. I think it's apt mark. Let's try that. Apt mark Terraform. No. All right. I'll look that up and put it in the comments there. Okay, so we have Terraform installed now. Next up is to determine the authentication method, and I say here use API keys. So you have two options. Number one is username and password, so whatever you use to log into Proxmox you can use for Terraform, or you can set up API keys. This involves setting up a new user, giving that new user required permissions, and then setting up API keys so that that user doesn't have to type in a password to perform actions. This is the preferred method. A lot of web type services use API keys instead of usernames and passwords. It's not great to be able to have passwords sitting in files or environmental variables, so you use the API keys instead, which can be controlled easier, revoked if necessary, and things like that. Okay, so we need to create a new user, and we're going to name it blog example. Which reminds me, I do need to just clean up a folder real quick, so I'm going to delete that out. Okay, alright, so I've got my Proxmox window open over here. Let's get this shrunk down just a little bit. Okay, we're going to name our new user blog example. To add a new user, go to data center on the left tab, and then permissions, and then users. And so let me just remove this so we can recreate it. Okay, so we're going to add a new user, and we're going to call it blog example, and then add. Okay, so now we have a new user. Next we need to add the API token. So click API tokens below user, which will be right here, and then click add. So select the user we just created, which is blog example, and give the token an ID. We'll call it new token ID. And then uncheck privilege separation. So this means that the API token for the user blog example basically has the same exact permissions as the user itself. Okay, so when you click add, it will show you the key. Save this key. It will never be displayed again. And it says this here also. Please record the API token secret. It will be displayed now and never again. All right, so we're gonna going to copy that, and we're going to put it into Notepad. Okay, so oops. All right, so we have the key. Next up, we need to add roles to the user. This gives the user permissions. So we go to permissions, add user permission. So the first one we want to do is this root path. You know, I haven't spent too much time looking at what exactly needs to be done here. Usually you want to make sure the user and roles are the minimum required to accomplish the task at hand. But we're just going to go with the high level, high privilege stuff here for today. Okay, so the path is root, the user is blog example, the role will be PVE VM admin, virtual machine admin, which gives you know, certain privileges, which are over here. So we're going to click OK for that. The full list of privileges is available here under roles. So we just did VM admin, which includes all these things. And the next one, I think data store admin is actually the other one we need, but I know admin works, so we're just going to do that. So I don't have to reshoot this. All right, permissions. Okay, so we also need to add permissions to the storage used by the virtual machines we want to deploy, both from and to. And so for me, this is /storage/local-ZFS, and it might be local LVM for you if you're not using ZFS. Add that to in the path section. Okay, so we're going to do new user permission, we're going to do storage/local-ZFS, we're going to do the user we just created, and we are going to give it administrator. And this is where I'm saying there's probably a better choice out there, but we're just going to use administrator for now. Okay, so at this point we're done with the permissions. We have the roots with blog example, PVE, VM admin, and we have the storage with administrator. Okay, that all checks out. Okay, so it's time to turn to Terraform. Alright, so it's got three main stages, init, plan, and apply. And so we will start with making a new directory for our files that we will be using for Terraform. Alright, so cd and the tilde guy, that just brings you home. Did I actually want to do that? Let me see here. No, I didn't, since I'm on WSL. So we're just going to go back to the directory we were in. Alright, so whatever your home directory is, for me it's this, since this is Windows, Linux mishmash. We're just going to make a new directory and change directory to that new directory, calling it terraform-blog, and then touch these two file names. We'll create the files, but they will be blank. Okay, so main.tf is where we're going to put the majority of the content, and then we're going to stick a couple of variables in vars.tf. I don't think it actually matters what these are named, since Terraform reads everything in all together, but just to keep things reasonably named and separated. Alright, so in main.tf we need to add the bare minimum. So we need to tell Terraform to use a provider, which is the term used for the connector to the entity Terraform will be interacting with. So since we are using Proxmox, we need to use a Proxmox provider. And this is actually a lot easier than I thought it would be. You know, there were a number of tutorials I saw that said you need to go download all this code and then compile it, make sure you have Go installed, that sort of thing. But it turns out it's much easier than that. We just have to say, here's our source, and then run it, and then Terraform will grab it from GitHub and install it. Okay, so I copied this text, and so now I need to open up the file, main.tf. So I'm doing that on my other monitor here. Okay, so here is our blank main.tf file. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that in and save it with Control S. So now we have main.tf showing that we are doing Terraform. We have a required providers section saying our required provider is Proxmox, and the source is telmate/Proxmox, and so that is this GitHub. We'll go out and grab it. So yeah, as far as I can tell, there isn't really an official provider for pretty much anything, but there's a variety of community providers, and this one is the one that we will be using. Okay, so save the file. Now we'll initialize Terraform with our bare bones plan, which will be Terraform init, which will force it to go out and grab the provider. If it goes well, we'll be informed the provider is installed. Okay, so let's copy this command, Terraform init, paste, enter. Alright, so it says initializing the backend, initializing plugin providers, finding telmate/Proxmox, matching our version 2.7.4, blah blah blah, and then it says installed here. Terraform has been successfully initialized. You may begin working with Terraform. Great. Okay, so we have our provider installed. Alright, so next up is time to deploy the VM. So we'll be using the template we created in the last post, which is named, we'll put in the variables file, but it's Ubuntu-2004-cloud-init-template. So I do have this all easily copied pasted. So go ahead and copy all of this, and we will go through it line by line here in a minute. So this is for the main.tf file again. I'm just going to paste this in. Control S to save, and then we'll go through it. Okay, so the first section is what we just did to get the provider. We don't need to change that at all. So next up is actually defining the provider. So this is for the Proxmox provider. We have a number of variables we need to set. So there are 4 of these. Basically the lines that don't have the pound sign in front, the hashtag. So number 1 is the PM Proxmox API URL, and so this will be the host name of your Proxmox instance, followed by /API2/JSON, and so you can see here, my Proxmox host name is prox-1u, since it's a 1u server. My domain here, home.fluffnet.net, and so you really don't, whatever system you use for DNS, either put the IP address in here or the host name if you have that set up, followed by the /API2/JSON. So API token is in the form of username @PAM. That's the default Linux authentication with the exclamation and then the token ID. And so this would be the username you created here. Which we're using blog example, so I already have this from the first time I wrote this post. Blog example @PAM, and then the exclamation, and then the token ID, which is new token ID. And then so that secret that we had earlier, I think I might have deleted it. Oh no, we still have it here. Okay, so we're going to copy that, and then we're going to replace it. And don't worry, this will be deleted by the time this video goes live, so it will be useless. And then leave TLS insecure set to true, unless you have your Proxmox certificate situation sorted out. If you do, generally you won't. So just leave that to true. So these are the 4 Proxmox variables we need. The PM API URL, which tells us where to go interact with Proxmox. The API token ID is the name of the API token. The secret is essentially the API password, if you can think of it that way, and then TLS insecure deals with it essentially deals with this certificate stuff. So since it says it's not secure, we need to leave it at true, since it is insecure. Okay, so next up is defining the resource itself, and so the resource is formatted to be type, and then entity name. And so in this case, we're going to create a Proxmox VM QEMU entity named test server. So you can see here we have a resource, and the resource will be of type Proxmox VM QEMU, and this resource name will be test server. And so this is different, can be different than the host name you give it. this is just where we're at for this. Okay, so first thing is count. This is how many of these resources you want. So just set it to 1 for now. If you set it to 0 and apply, you will destroy the virtual machine. Next up is the name, and so this will be test-vm- and then this is a variable, and so count index starts at 0. So with the +1, the resulting name will be test-vm-1 in Proxmox. So next up is the target node. This is essentially saying I want my VM to be cloned from and to this Proxmox host. And so it says this now reaches out to the Vars file, which we have not done yet. So we will get to that in a minute, but we can just leave this as a variable for now. Okay. So we've got another variable here. This is the template to clone, which will be var.template name, and we'll cover those in a minute. So basic VM settings here. Agent refers to guest agent. Doing what the guest agent? Yes, 1. OS type is cloud-init. We've got 2 cores, 1 socket. Blah blah blah. 2 gigabytes of memory. Basically just leave this stuff as default. So disk size goes here. 10 gigabytes. The storage will be different if you are not using ZFS. It could be LVM. Next up is the network. We're just saying it's a VirtIO NIC on bridge VMBR0. If you want another NIC, you basically just have to copy this whole section. So it would look like this. And then you would have 2. You could put this one on VMBR1, for example. I did see in some places it has like ID equals 1, ID equals 0, ID equals 1, whatever. I don't know if it's a newer version of Terraform or a new version of the provider, but it did not like that, so we're not including that stuff anymore. And then I think this is just to ignore like IP addresses, lifecycle ignore changes network. Not 100% on that. So next up is the IP config. So this is setting the IP address in the gateway. So the variable here appends text to the end of whatever you have in front of it. So in this case, since we're only adding a single VM, the IP will be 10.98.1.9 with a 1 appended to it. So it'll be .91 since count.index starts at 0. And so this is how you can create multiple VMs and have a different IP assigned to each. Basically, if we had count of 3, the first one would be .91, the second one would be .92, the third one would be .93. And then make sure you have your netmask set correctly. It's probably going to be /24, and then give it your gateway also. The last variable and the last setting we need is for the SSH key. And so this is just saying SSH key is, add this stuff from this file type here. It's just appending it from the variables essentially. Okay, so that's the main .tf file. So next we'll look at the vars.tf file. Okay, so I'm just going to copy and paste this. This is a bit more self-explanatory. Basically, we just declare a variable, give it a name, put some brackets, and give it a default value. You can define different values for a variable based on something. I haven't got that far yet, but just know that is available. So the SSH key is this. Copy and paste it from the machine you're planning on SSHing from. The variable Proxmox host is that prox1u we were talking about. And the template name, ubuntu-2004-cloud-init-template. So we're going to save that also with Control S. So these are both now saved. Okay, so next up is plan. So now with the .tf file is completed, we can run the plan, which is Terraform Plan. We defined count 1, so we would expect Terraform to create a single VM. Let's let it run through the plan and tell us what it's going to do. So we paste that in there, hit enter. Okay, so here's Terraform Plan. Terraform will create. It'll create the following actions. Here is our resource type. Here is the name. We're only doing 1. Computers indices generally start at 0. So we will create a test server with the things we told it. Here's where you check the IP to make sure it's what you want. The host name will be test-vm1. Here's our SSH key. Target node is what we expect. And then the rest of this looks good. So the plan is we add one. We're not changing any, and we're not destroying any. And one of the nice things about Terraform is it tells you what to run next. So, you know, oh, if you want to, for the next step, do apply. If we go up here, you can say, oh, the next step is Terraform Plan. So I do kind of like that. I mean, there's only 3 steps. They're not that hard to remember. But okay, so this is all the copy-paste, basically what we just looked for. Also note that it tells us what step to run next. Terraform apply. Alright, so let's go ahead and apply. So we're going to copy that command, paste it, hit enter. And so it thinks, it goes and checks Proxmox and sees what's already out there, sees if it has to do anything. Okay, so it's basically just telling us the same stuff. Terraform will use the selected providers to create. Test server will be created. Okay. It says, do you want to perform these actions? So we type in yes, and then we hit enter. Okay, so now it's creating, and we can watch it get created here in Proxmox. So we can see test VM1 is already on its way. For me, this generally takes a little over a minute. You know, this is a fairly beefy server. We've got this Xenon 2678 V3 with 96 gigabytes of memory. So this stuff is basically all cached in memory already. So the majority of the time, as far as I can tell, is spent expanding the disk. My storage is only SATA SSD. I don't have any. Actually, that's a lie. I do have NVMe in here, but it is only for the read cache of my ZFS file store. Alright, so it says it's running. Alright, so 1 minute, 1 second, apply complete, resources added, 1 added, 0 changed, 0 destroyed. And so here we can see that the guest agent is now successfully reporting the IP address. So this is doing a couple things. Post creation, it's mostly just I think cloud-init. It updates something. I don't remember exactly what. But this is now up and running, and so we can SSH into it. I'm going to get an error here because the key is different. Ubuntu at 10.1.98, or sorry, 91. And so this does take a minute the first time you log in. The networking might still be initialized also. Alright, so yep, it's saying it's changed. I know, that's because I've done this quite a few times at this point. So we basically just need to copy this, paste it, say I trust this, take out the old key, and then we're going to put the new key in. Do we want to trust that? Yes, we do. And we're in. So test VM1 is accessible after about a minute, 15 seconds being up. You know, test VM1. This is the VM we created. So pretty cool stuff here. You can use this to create as many VMs as you want, or as many VMs as you have resources for. So we're going to shut this back down because we don't need it anymore. Shutdown dash. Did this last night also with my previous video. We need to sudo that. Okay. So it is shut down, it is closed. I'm actually not going to exit that. So we can see the status is stopped. If you recall, by going to count, if we set the count to 0, it will be destroyed. So we're going to go back to main.tf, set the count equal to 0, save it, and then we will rerun Terraform apply and see what it tells us it's going to do. Plan, 1 to destroy. So if we go up, we see this test server index 0 will be destroyed, which is what we want. So we will type in yes, and we will see how long it takes to destroy it. Alright, it's gone. So that's a wrap. You know, we skipped ahead here a little bit. We did get the message of the one added, and we logged into it. We don't need it, so we logged out, and we already destroyed it. So let's see. Oh, so this is that section we just did. Last is removing the test VM. set the count to 0, and then apply, and the VM is stopped and destroyed. So I said this felt like a quick and dirty tutorial for how to use Terraform. There's really quite a bit of detail, so I pulled from a number of different places. I listed 3 references down here. Number 1 is the official Terraform site, and then a couple other sites that basically have the same thing as me. So I did use other resources, but these were the main ones. But there's a lot going on here, a lot of moving parts. You got to make sure they're all right. It took me quite a few hours to figure out some nuances originally, but got it all together in one place here for you to learn and apply this on your own. And so I have used this to deploy a full set of Kubernetes virtual machines to this Proxmox cluster. And I'm calling it a thrilling sequel to that post, using Ansible to bootstrap a Kubernetes cluster. So I've done that as well. I am kind of far behind on writing the blogs for these posts. Really, I guess this next one will be pretty straightforward. The full set of Kubernetes machines, the Proxmox cluster, I'll basically just need to put it in the config file for that. And then click post, because that's about all it is. But using Ansible to bootstrap the Kubernetes cluster is going to be a bit more complicated. So, alright, hope you learned something. If you did, go ahead, click like and subscribe, and be sure to check in soon for the next set of videos. Alright, thanks guys. Have a good one.